Hi, I want to welcome you to our series of At Home with Experts, and I'm really, really thrilled to have my friend and colleague Dan Siegel on today. And Dan, it's great to see you, and
Nice
good to know
see you,
you
Lisa.
today, and your family as well. First thing I was going to ask you is just what have you seen with people that you're working with during this time, or what people are struggling with since this pandemic started?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to see you. And these are times that, we all, I think, know are different from anything we've experienced before. And the amazing thing about the isolation that so many of us are experiencing is we experience it in different ways. So, some people don't have access to the internet, so they can't even watch this discussion. So we need to honor that. In fact, for some people, they're very, very isolated. For other people, we have the privilege of being able to access each other through the internet. So if you're isolated at home, at least you can, while be physically distant, you could also be socially connected, and we can talk about that. Some people, are in groups, like we have a group of 4 people that we share our viral bubble, so we have ways of mixing it up. Caroline, my wife, and I, aren't just with each other. So I don't know how it would be if we had 3 months of just being with each other. It'd be different than the way it is, because we can mix it up with our son and his wonderful girlfriend, Julia. So we have a kind of a family experience. And so it really depends on how the people are doing. I work with some people who are just by themselves, and that's really, really hard. We're very social creatures, and depending on what a person's background is, from an attachment point of view, that can elicit certain echoes of maybe being isolated in your own relationships as a child, and so that brings up certain issues. Also, temperament is very important. Some people actually thrive on a kind of being able to control their space and their time and their knowledge, and so this is a time that actually feels comforting for them in a certain way that may be even surprising to them. Other people get very agitated when they don't have the freedom to go out and travel, or to, move around space without being worried about things. And so really it's varied. And clearly one of the terrifying things is that you might get a virus that's hidden to the eye, but that still can affect your breathing. So in some ways, as I think a number of epidemiologists have said, it's kind of like your worst nightmare, that it's an invisible threat. So it's activating the part of our nervous system that's always on guard for danger. So it's activating that. So people I know and also work with, are feeling this kind of inability to focus attention and get anything done. I'm certainly finding the only thing I can get done is cleaning, which Caroline is very happy about. So I have this house unbelievably clean, it's about the level of attention I can do. I can wash a dish and then wash the next dish, or clean this bathroom and then clean the next bathroom. So I find cleaning to be a way to deal with a lot of the incredible brainstem activation of danger, and just focus it on trying to master something in the face of the helplessness that this invisible threat can bring to us. And also the loss not only of lives from COVID-19 as the disorder from the SARS-2 virus, this new coronavirus that unfortunately can infect us. At least a third of us can get infected and not even know we're infected and still be contagious. So this is where, it's the phrase "it's the worst nightmare" is that it is spread by the air, in ways you cannot see, by people you cannot know, might be infecting you. And so people are wary about each other, and wearing masks, hides part of the nonverbal communication. So there's a feeling of disconnection. when I walk around the park with my 90-year-old mother, we're both decked up in our masks so we don't infect each other, especially me to her. There's just a sense of paranoia that, the joggers with masks feel like they're really respecting us, especially my 90-year-old mom, and the joggers without masks look at us. And I have some relatives in Texas, and apparently this is true in Texas. If you wear a mask, you're looked down upon, like you're caving into some kind of strange belief in science or something like that. Whereas in Massachusetts, you don't wear a mask, you get charged $300. So it's just an amazing moment of division in the ununited states, where we're seeing a lot of the states that didn't have much control, or even the ones that did, like North Carolina, are now having surges of illness again. And so I'm saying all this kind of rambling, but I think we're all facing something that we should just name, which is a threat state, and each of us handles that in a different way. We're also facing an isolation state, and we're handling that in different ways. And then for many people, they're not only there's their threat of loss of their lives, but loss of livelihood. And so people's financial situation is being intensely affected, so that people of color are, twice, 2.5 times as likely to get the illness, to get sick from the illness, and also to be affected, financially. That the employment imbalance is really disfavoring people of color who've been marginalized. So this is an incredible moment also with the murder of George Floyd, revealing the murders of many people of color, and just this being a tipping point of world awareness somehow, that people are realizing there's so much injustice going on, that it's activated people to go out and protest, even in the face of this being an increased risk of getting COVID-19 yourself or spreading it, with the chanting and the spraying of all the air from your lungs, which is how it's transmitted. So we'll have to see what happens 2 weeks after the protests in terms of surges again. So it's just, it's almost beyond words, I think, which is what a lot of people I work with are saying. And, I try to remember what the Dalai Lama said, which is, that he was asked once, why does he laugh so much? What's wrong with him when there's so much suffering? And he said, it's not in spite of the suffering, it's because of the suffering. Because if we stop laughing and have joy, the suffering will have won. And so it's our responsibility to not only have integrity, as John O'Donohue would say, the poet, wonderful philosopher, would say, the duty of privilege is absolute integrity, but the duty of being someone who's trying to help reduce the suffering in the world with compassionate action, is to be joyful and light if you can, and laugh. So it's been, for me personally, it's been an incredible honor to try to help these different ways everyone is dealing with it. And also personally to remind myself of that view from Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, beautifully described in the Book of Joy, that this is a time of really digging deep to try to develop resilience and wake up every day and feel the incredible privilege of being alive, and knowing that these are very VUCA times, VUCA, volatile, meaning they change fast, uncertain, meaning it's hard to predict, complex, meaning even if you spend 5 hours reading the paper, you still can't figure out what in the world is going on. And A is ambiguous, meaning even if you think you figured it out, it's not really clear that what you think is going this way couldn't mean something else. Ambiguity meaning there's not a clear meaning there. Yeah. So, these VUCA times are upon us. And yeah. I think I better stop talking because I'm going to go on and on and on. The last thing I'll just say is that we don't know when they're going to end, which makes them like, there may be a reality that for the foreseeable future, this is the new VUCA life we live. And for some people, that absolutely freaks them out. For others, it's like an adrenaline rush that gives them kind of a sense of meaning and purpose. So it's been the short answer, Lisa, to your really beautiful question is it's been varied. And I'm trying to give you the full catastrophe view, as John would say, John Kabat-Zinn, of how do you actually show up for the whole thing and and realize the fullness of what's happening to us on the planet.
Right,
It's not
right.
just like here in United States or here in North America or here in California or here wherever your here is. Here is spaceship Earth, we're all in this spaceship together, and whether it's the pandemic of a virus or the pandemic of racism or the pandemic of environmental destruction, let's wake up to the privilege of trying to make this a better world. So anyway, that's what we're trying to do as best we
Yeah.
can and the different things I'm doing.
Yeah, no, me too. And I agree with you. All those viruses or all those, pandemics, if you will, that are going on, which are really, so moving and so upsetting at the same time, and, the whole thing with in relation to the racism really, gets to me personally because I have family members. I remember when, which was it, Trayvon Martin died, that he looks a lot like one of my nephews. My nephews are mixed race, and so are some of my nieces for that matter. But it just, just thinking about that, this precious young smiling face, it's hard. And to worry for their safety or well-being in that way, as well as obviously from this the viral pandemic we're dealing with.
Well, and yeah, and I guess, I mean, to really build on that, I think for myself, and if you watched that video of George Floyd being murdered, and just watch the face of the police officer whose knee was on George Floyd's neck for that nearly 9-minute period. When you watch his face, you see a face, lacking in kind of a taking in of the gravity of what he was doing. And when you look at the studies of, what's called mortality salience or terror management, when you're confronted with a threat, someone you deem to be in the out group, so we have in-group, out-group evaluations the brain makes, and when the human being in front of you is placed in the in-group, you treat them with more compassion and kindness and care, and you could see that on someone's face. They really resonate with the other person, they're awake, alive. But when someone's deemed to be in the out group under threat, then the circuitry of empathy, taking in the other person's point of view or subjective experience or honoring their agency, you shut off those networks. And when those networks are shut off, you also are shutting off the networks of compassion, where you sense the suffering of another and imagine what you might do to help them and try to help them. So for me, watching that video was such a painful example of a human being, the officer, who deemed the person under his knee to be in the out group, shut off his circuitry of empathy and compassion, and on his face you saw a deadness to the communication of George Floyd and the communication of the people holding the cameras and surrounding him, saying, "Stop doing this.
Yeah.
Stop doing this." And I think that's, the reality of that a human being, the policeman, could have such a state, a shutting off of seeing the humanity in another human, is terrifying.
Yeah.
And if that's in a parent, it's terrifying. If it's in a friend, it's terrifying. If it's in a police officer, it's terrifying. If it's in the head of an organization or a nation or whatever, a position of authority, it's terrifying. And so I think the whole world is kind of humans is responding to this because it's such a clear-cut example of what we humans are vulnerable to doing, which is dehumanizing people we deem in the outgroup. And I think this is something that's been with us for probably 50 million years of primate evolution, and likely has been then elaborated with our complex social hierarchies that, we can say, oh, you believe in, this kind of God. Well, I'm going to kill you because that's not my God. Or, I've even been to a baseball game where, one baseball team is losing and people with the baseball caps of the winning team get their heads bashed in by the other team members because they're threatened to lose the World Series. I've literally been in Boston where blood is flying everywhere because of that, so the Yankees are the out group and the Red Sox are the in group, and so, we have, especially when you've had a little beer, we have this capacity to, have genocide basically. And systemic racism is just that. And we live in a country, United States, that became formed on the slavery of Africans and on the murder of indigenous peoples here. 400 years of dehumanization has formed the United States of America. So I think it's coming to grips with that reality that's fueling, what we see.
Yeah. And I think that what you said about the findings from terror management are really important because it's this idea of othering. I remember hearing some of the founders of that, I think it was Jeff Greenberg actually, giving a presentation where he's talking about when you prime people, that all people are part of the in-group. So if you show people pictures of families around the world interacting, they start to feel like everybody's in the in-group and they get kind toward others, no matter whether they come from your nation or have your skin color or religion or whatever. But if you show them just people walking in the street all over the world, doesn't do it.
Wait, so what's the priming that does it? Family photos?
Seeing photos of families interacting from all over the world.
Oh, wow.
So again, putting it in that context, if we relate to having a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all had mothers, fathers, or siblings perhaps, and children. We can relate to that context as being like us. The other was showing them pictures of people just walking in the streets in different parts of the world.
That's amazing, because how does it sit with you, Lisa, that that's such a beautiful story, and in contrast, I think about that study of the 14-month-old kids when they show which cereal they like and which cereal they don't like, and then you show them a puppet that you have like their cereal and a different color puppet likes the cereal they don't like, and they treat the puppet that likes their cereal nicely, and then the puppet that happens to like a cereal that they don't like, they treat them harshly at 14 months of age. So it's unlikely to be something a parent taught, like mistreat puppets that like your cereal, that don't like your cereal, so how do you sit with that idea that we're so vulnerable as humans to outgroup people not like us because of the way they look, because of what they believe, the church or temple they attend or don't attend, or the cereal they like or don't like, the baseball team they're in or not in? I mean, we do this, and we do this. It's not just about skin color. Skin color is one way since the time of the Portuguese basically stealing of people from Africa. This one view is that's where, racism began. And the idea of race, even because slave, were people who were the same skin color, so this is just one way of dividing it, and how do you sit with that idea of belonging and like me and not like me? And because sometimes it feels so, it's like, wow, that's what our species does.
Yeah, I think it is something our species does. I think it's also something we can counter because we start to, I like the view that, not only are we all interconnected, because we all are on this spaceship Earth, if you will, or on this planet together, that we have to share. We can't stop pollution one place and not another place and have it just not affect you, whether it's your city or even your country, right? And, we're all in this boat together. I remember another one of the terror management guys, Sheldon Solomon, saying as human beings, we're all in the same boat, albeit a sinking boat.
Mhm.
Because of our mortality,
Yeah.
and dealing with that. But we're all in the same situation. And, and it's not just all of us human beings, it's all of the creatures on this earth, that we also don't respect or treat particularly well, that
Yeah.
and we seem to care the least about things that seem the most different than us, but still, it's just not, it's not, it's a problem. I think we really have to start to think about it differently. And I think, I know I've heard you talk about people widening their circles of compassion, but it
Mhm.
really happened in a big way.
So how, I guess for someone listening to us, I were looking for something practical from this conversation. I would ask you, Lisa, this is, and we can talk about practical ideas, but how do you find you give yourself resilience, you build your mental health, you work on anxiety or depression that might be creeping in, or the despair, the hopelessness, the helplessness, the feeling of anguish, the existential angst that we literally can have anxiety about our very existence. All these, states are what I think we're vulnerable now to experiencing. And what is your way for yourself, for uh, building a positive way of dealing with that? In addition to how to deal with, what's going on in terms of racism and the realization of dehumanization that's been going on.
Yeah, I think I do a couple things. One is I focus on my sense of connection to others. I've been doing some of your wheel of awareness stuff, and just sort of really focusing not just on my own experiences and sensations, but also on my sense of connectedness to others, and trying to nurture those connections and give them the priority and time that maybe I have a little more available in some ways, because I'm not rushing around so much right now. Have to be in one place, and even if it's connecting with people virtually, doing more of that. That and getting into nature really is helpful for me. Trees matter, for me a
Yeah.
lot,
Hmm.
I'm lucky I live on a ranch, so I can take a walk without even the danger of leaving my own property. But, it's really nice to get out into nature, and trying to do that every day and do something like that. And I often share that with my husband, with Ron, and we take a walk at the end of the day. And that matters, that getting out and having that kind of time, you know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
And NPR just did a very painful piece on how nature is so important for children. And yet, with the staying home in place for many kids, that means not being in nature. And then one creative solution to reopening schools is let's reopen them outside in the yard and just grow some more trees and be out there, so that ironically you can't go inside the classroom. Good, now you're going to be in nature outside, and just put up some sunshade. So it was an interesting solution, but nature is so important. I feel the same. I don't live on a ranch or anything, but I live close to a state park, so I go walk hiking and riding my bike often. Or Alex, my son, and I just went for a swim in the ocean the other day, and it really rejuvenates you if you can get out in nature and realize we are a part of a much larger natural whole. And that if you, and this I guess for me too is the wheel of awareness that you mentioned, you get this feeling of this body you're in is actually just one part of a much larger aspect of your identity, and so you are a part of nature. Yeah.
Yeah, see
What
that.
are other, yeah, what are other things that
Um,
have been helpful to you?
uh, being talking to somebody when I get frustrated, when I reach my point of I can't do this anymore, which happens, I have my moments,
Yeah.
and that can be helpful, talking to a good friend. I'm trying to think of what else, trying to find what is the meaning for me for now. For
Mm.
me, it helps to, even though it is so ambiguous and uncertain, um, just putting in my, taking in, at least for me, it helps to put it in a container. So, okay, let's say this is for a year, and maybe it'll be more and maybe it'll be less, but things will be different for sure. I think forever in some ways, but a year of maybe this very much more having to be careful state. That helps me to kind of put it in some kind of container and, think about, okay, so how do I make my life meaningful now, given that this
Mm.
is what I'm doing for this year?
Hmm.
What's the most meaningful use of my time now? And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that I'm working. I am seeing people regularly, so I'm, working many days, which is important to me. I've been given presentations at some virtual conferences, not the same, but better than nothing.
Yeah.
And and
Shorter
things like
commute
this
time.
conversation. What?
Shorter commute time. You don't have to fly anywhere.
Right. And you don't have to be away from people. You don't have to rush so much.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing is, these conversations have mattered to me because it's connecting with people that I like, who are friends and colleagues, and having those kind of conversations and feeling that part of my identity too,
Hmm.
has been important. So, kind of a whole series of ways that I'm, trying to, you know, keep that sense of connection with others and a sense of meaning and purpose in life, even given the circumstances.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like you said, I think this has been in that terror management research that you mentioned, one of the things about that, like, one of their ideas and one of their experimental manipulations, if you will, is to raise people's awareness of their own death by reading a paragraph or watching something. But, I think for this pandemic, and not only that, the fight, against injustice and inequality in this country are raising our death salience, watching that video, seeing another human being die in front of our eyes, it does really raise our mortality salience, if you will, I think for all of us, our
Yeah.
awareness of mortality. And, that can make your life more meaningful because we got to make every day count and every minute count because this is what we have. And I like John Kabat-Zinn, thing of what time is it? It's still now,
Is
you
now.
know,
Oh, it's now again. Yeah.
now again,
Yeah.
and we, you know, and that this is the time we know we're going to have is right now. So
Mhm.
we should make the most of it. And it's not time to be wasted if we can, you know, but having still to contain our fears and anxieties. And,
Mhm.
and we're doing lots of cleaning too,
Yeah. Yeah.
and lots of being very careful.
Mhm.
But, those things matter.
Yeah. That's very helpful. Um, I find for myself, there's a couple uh, uh, additional things, in addition to nature and the cleaning, that I also find helpful. One is, the idea of structure, which, in the usual course of a working day, your structure is kind of set for you, but sometimes with the stay-at-home thing, it's not the same. So I personally found setting up, David Rock and I made this thing called the Healthy Mind Platter, and
Mhm.
there's got 7 daily activities that I try to do every day, and these are activities that the research shows really help your brain stay really healthy. So it might be good to review them, but I can just say that um, the structure I try to create each day has, in some ways, each of the 7 embedded in it. So if I get a little bit disrupted from, the first thing I try to do is what you could call the first of the 7, time in. And
Mhm.
this classically would be called, meditation or reflection or something like that. And, I also do the wheel of awareness every day, and it sort of sets the tone of, we would call it integrating consciousness, where you're distinguishing in the hub of this wheel as a meditation, the experience of being aware, and then on the rim are things you're aware of. So let's say there's a lot going on in terms of racial injustice, protests, the pandemic is increasing, stay-at-home issues, financial issues, all these issues. If you can do a practice that allows you to sense all those very real issues as points on the rim, but distinguish them or differentiate them, allow them to be different from the spaciousness of the hub, where pure awareness comes from. If I can, bring back to mind myself with a practice every day, like the wheel of awareness, this time in gives me the timelessness and spaciousness and, in a way, tranquility and joy, this what some people call equanimity of the hub, so that whatever is going on the rim, whatever I've heard about or whatever is happening to the family or whatever, there is this, I want to say the word solid, but it's not that it's solid. It's reliable access to a sanctuary of clarity that time in practice, the wheel of awareness, does. So that has been just a lifesaver in my personal life to have that, and then professionally to be teaching it to other people has been very rewarding. So the first one is time in, so to do that every day. The second one I try to do.
Just to mention, people can access at least a taste of that on your website, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We give it away for free. Either from, you can go to the drdansiegel.com website and just do the wheel. You can join we have a community where I've taught the practice to a really growing community called the MWE community, me plus we equals MWE, where we say, well, this is the challenge of the pandemic. How are we going to find meaning out of this moment of disruption and try to transform human culture across the planet, because we have members of the community from all over the world, and try to move the future of humanity in a different direction. So it actually helps a lot with the feeling of helplessness by not only being in this present, hub of the wheel, but actually then thinking, what is the future we'd like to create? And so cultural evolution can be shaped with that kind of intentionality to it. So it's called the PEP community, the personal experience of the planetary pandemic, which now has been an acronym changed to personal exploration of planetary possibility. So I welcome you all to join. So you can do it there too. But the next thing I try to do every day besides this time in is to do, and this has been just for me really important, physical exercise. So, really moving, time for movement. So physical activity is so important. And, a lot of us are locked in at home, and I stay most of the time in this house. I'm in my home office, but I made a little teeny gym outside, where I have weights and I have an aerobic thing, an elliptical. I've got other things that I do. And, I do a good amount of time, actually, an hour and a half of physical workout every day, sometimes just listening to music, sometimes listening to books, audio books or whatever. But I love that, and then, then I'll have a little food, just to keep my diet, the food I'm taking good. But, I actually try to do this intermittent fasting thing, which I find really good. You leave about somewhere between 15 and 16 hours between meals. So you have about 8 hours or so when you can eat, and then the rest of the time you're not eating. And I find that has been just great. And a lot of the research is showing it's a really good thing to do. So anyway, I've been doing that. And then, so that's time in, physical time, connecting with nature and people. So connecting time, really honoring that and reaching out to friends and family and colleagues, whether it's just on the phone or in these, Zoom type things or FaceTime or whatever. So connecting time, really important. And so that would be social connecting and nature connecting. Right. Then a fourth time that you could do every day is focus time, making sure I'm doing some study, even if it's for 10 minutes, because I can hardly focus my attention these days. But really, I'm particularly fascinated now with poetry. So I've cleaned out all the different books, put the ones that were used to write the last couple of books in boxes. And now I've taken out all of these. I've got about 80 poetry books,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm really, it's my new passion is to try to figure out the kind of the neurobiology of poetry.
Uh-huh.
So I've been doing that. So focus time. So that's number 4. Number 5 is downtime, where I have literally put in a hammock outside, and I will just get a feeling like now it's time to just flake out and do nothing. And sometimes I'll go up there, just listen to music, or I'll play guitar. Or just there's no goal, there's no plan, there's nothing. It's just downtime. So that's 5. That's number 5. I think that's number 5. Let's review. Time in, physical time. What else do we say? Connecting time. Um,
Focus
Focus
time.
time, and now downtime. And then the 6th time, which Caroline and I do every day, is we play a game, and we've become addicted to Scrabble. And so we are just having the greatest time playing. It's just the two of us, when Alex and Julie are not here, or we play Scrabble with them too. So we play Scrabble. So that's playtime, where it's just fun. There may be some rules, but we're just goofing around. No one's earning any money or anything. We're just playing. And then the 7th time, if I can remember it, is sleep time. Really, really honoring sleep. So really having a pretty clear time when we set an alarm, essentially, for when we get ready for bed. Not for when we wake up, but so for us, it's like when 9 o'clock is here, time to stop Scrabble, stop watching a movie or watching a movie, start getting ready for bed. And so by 10, lights out, and we're out. And I need a lot more sleep than Caroline. So I'm just getting, some days I wake up just with nightmares about what's going on, and wild dreams, but really trying to get the kind of sleep I need. And it's interesting with my partner, Caroline, she needs about an hour and a half less than I do. So I really need about 8.5 to 9 hours of sleep. And I find if I can really honor that by going to bed at 10, and getting up around 7, I feel so differently than if I follow her schedule and she's getting up, at 5:30. It's like it just doesn't. I can do it, I can get up, but I just feel like. But the difference is really remarkable. So everyone's got a different biological clock. So, but that's the 7th time and sleep time. And we know, that sleep. It's in so many ways it's helpful. But just to review for everyone to motivate you, you want to get good sleep, and you want it to be not interrupted if possible. Of course, you have to get up and go to the restroom when you get older, but that's fine. And you want to make it long enough. That's the key thing. And the thing that sleep seems to do is during the day when you're awake, your neurons are secreting, these inevitable toxins, like, the garbage that they can't help but secrete. And when you go to sleep, there's a shift in which cells are active in the brain, and the cleanup crew, these supportive astrocytes and oligodendrocytes and all these what are called glial cells, they are now going to work to clean up the mess that you made. So it's like, I like to compare it, to a party. You can have fun at the party, and that's great. That's when you're awake. But then when the guests go, the cleanup crew, which might be you, it takes on a whole different role when you're cleaning up versus when you're having fun. So wake time is like fun. And then, cleanup time when you're sleeping is, you got to get rid of it. And if you don't, unfortunately, the toxins accumulate, inflammation in the brain arises, which is not good for you and maybe a cause of dementia, for example. Your insulin metabolism doesn't work as well, so you actually are more prone to diabetes and being overweight, which is not good for your health. And you can't focus your attention or remember as much, and your mood is irritable and unstable. So for all those reasons, sleep is one of our 7 top things you can do. And, what I found helpful about the Healthy Mind Platter is if you just put it up on your refrigerator or wherever you want to put it up, you can
Yeah.
download it from our website, make a copy, put it up on the wall, try to do those 7 every day. And it's kind of like, I don't know how you are, but, so if I'm making a meal, which we're cooking a lot these days, I'll say, I think I need some tomatoes, or I think I need some onions, or my body just tells me. So these 7 things, if you start doing them every day, your body will say, okay, now I think I'll do this one. So it's not like there's an absolute amount of each of the 7 that you
Right.
need to do, but each day, make sure you do each of the 7. And I
Right.
think you'll find you're going to start developing resilience.
Right. I think that's so important. And I think having that intention and putting it up on the wall is a good idea, you
Yeah.
know, and I know that sleep is the one I've improved on the most during this pandemic.
Mhm.
There are the upsides because I was getting by on 6.5 hours, which is not really what my body would like, which is 8.
Is 8?
And
Mhm.
yeah, it
How do
is.
you
It
feel
doesn't.
different? How do you feel? What's the difference in how you feel between 6.5 hours of sleep versus 8?
Well, instead of trying to keep myself awake, I'm just awake, first of all.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I'm not going to reach for caffeine as much. I'm also, or nibble as much. I think also I'm just like not finding myself that drowsy thing in the afternoon that I used to get. I'm not getting
Yeah.
because I'm not sleep deprived. And also it just makes for a whole more relaxing going to bed because I'm not trying to get to sleep right away so I can wake up right away so I can know what to do.
Right.
Stopping the rushing helped a lot.
Mm.
And it was all self-imposed. I mean, but still, it's nice to
Isn't
have
that
it.
interesting? I mean, it's so interesting. And Lisa, I don't know, you and I used to have very busy travel schedules. And I know I mean, as painful and sad and horrible as this situation is, which it is, you really want to try find some kind of meaning out of it, which is what this PEP group is all about, is trying to find a way to take the disruption and turn it into something positive. For me personally, after traveling for 25 years, probably 2 or 3 times a month to the airport for a quarter of a century, uh, I now have this abrupt stop in what I've been doing literally for 25 years. Um, and I don't know if anything would have stopped it short of a planetary pandemic. And so now I'm just at home, but I'm teaching just as much actually, maybe
Uh-huh.
even more, on these online things. So I love teaching. So it's been so interesting because, I'm still engaging with people in exploring knowledge, which I love to do. And I get to stay home, which I love to do. And I'm getting a lot of sleep, which I love to do. And I'm spreading out the 7 daily activities, which is really great. And I'm meditating like mad, which is fun, and exercising. So I'm really in good physical shape. You can't see it, but I have my t-shirt on, and it's just been like, if you can find anything positive in this whole thing, for me, it's been a gift to make a simpler life, and to have, as painful as the world is to have kind of this clarity of kind of thinking about our human culture, and perhaps finding a way collectively to transform, in a way, what you would call our identity, so that you go from the private, isolated, solo self that modern culture has told us we are, and you bust through what E.O. Wilson, the biologist, would call an illusion of a separate self, and Einstein called a delusion, a psychotic belief of a separate self, and say, okay, well, this is a really, really horrible situation with loss of lives and livelihoods, and not but, and what are we going to do to try to transform our way of living in the world so that, we can be supporting one another across the planet in living a different way, so that racism is reduced, health is increased, and the way we treat the environment is completely changed, right? And so the good news about humanity is we have the capacity with choice to make cultural transformation a truth in our lives. So I think we're at a time of incredible hopefulness. I mean, this we community, which I'm urging you to join,
Mhm.
is been so gratifying because through the pain of the turmoil comes this vision of a collective dream of where we might go together, and it just gives a lot of hope and energy. Every day I wake up and take a look at what the we community is talking about in the platform that we have for everyone to talk to each other. It's just been amazing to see how we could work together to try to make this a better world.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And yeah, I don't think anything would have changed my schedule either. I mean, to this extent, I've been trying to cut it back forever and never quite doing it like I know you have too. And this really changed it, just stopped it cold, the travel. And it did really help me to slow down and be more present. And I still, hope to enjoy travel and adventure at some point. But, that'll that's for the future to hold and know. But I really am enjoying this time of a simpler life too.
Hmm.
And um, just not as complex in some ways and very complex in terms of what's going on in the world and trying, like you said, to understand or make sense of, you know, what we think we might know about what's happening with this virus or with,
Hmm.
the struggles for more equality or whatever. But, there's the changing stories every day of trying to understand all that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and
but we
there is
can't
that.
do these 7 healthy things though.
Let's say it again.
We can do those 7 healthy things though, keeping our lives healthy. And I do know that the exercise and the getting out in nature for me has been really an important part, getting more sleep. And these are things that have actually gotten better with the pandemic
Hmm.
because I'm making more time for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a strange, and maybe this is the nature of the mind itself. There's a strange way where we have an inner life that is part of what the mind is, and then we have a relational life. So we have the reality of all the suffering going on in the world, all the ways in which across the planet humanity in many ways has come to a stop. Um, and then we have our inner life, how we feel and what we think and what we remember and what we're hoping for and our longings and our intentions, our desires. All of that, the inner life of the mind, is not separate from the inter life of the mind, our relationship to all these larger things about our connection to people on the planet. And so we have this, opportunity, in our field of interpersonal neurobiology, we would say, how would you integrate those? How would you allow them to both be there and then to link them? And so in many ways, resilience comes from integration. So it's a way of, if you think about, I start the Aware book with this analogy, but if you think about like a container of water, and if you've come to the pandemic without having had any opportunity to cultivate the size of your container of awareness. And let's say it's the size, like many people's are, of like an espresso cup. And now life brings all the volatility and uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity, these VUCA times, which let's think of it as the analogy of salt in a tablespoon, and dumps it in your espresso cup size container of awareness. And now you're flooded and it's way too salty to metabolize, right? It's too salty to drink. So think about these time and practices, and one of them, of many, is just the wheel of awareness, where you take that hub, and that's the container of awareness, and instead of being the size of an espresso cup, you do the wheel of awareness practice, and in that practice, you enlarge that size to be like, let's say, 100 gallons in size. And now life dishes out a challenge, these VUCA times of the pandemic, which is, again, the tablespoon of salt. Dump it into your now expanded container of awareness, 100 gallons, mix it up, and a tablespoon of salt in 100 gallons of water, you can drink perfectly well. It's fresh to the taste. So this is what these time and practices can do, is they can basically take your container of awareness and prepare you for life's inevitable challenges in a way that really builds resilience. And I think this is where, even if you look at the research on different reflective practices, that have three components in them. One is you're going to train focused attention. A second is you're going to train the opening of awareness. And a third is you're going to train kind intention or loving kindness. And when you have those three pillars, the research is very clear. You're not only going to integrate your brain in ways that are the basis of resilience, but you're going to also, reduce the stress hormone cortisol, improve the way your heart communicates with your head, which balances things out in a beautiful way. You're going to increase your immune system's capabilities so you can fight infection more effectively. You're going to reduce the amount of inflammation you have systemically through your body by altering the non-DNA molecules that regulate the inflammatory response. And you're going to actually enhance the optimization of an enzyme called telomerase, which is the enzyme that repairs and maintains the telomeres, the ends of your chromosomes that keep the integrity of the DNA, the nucleic acids that are the sequences that help regulate how the body functions. So, reducing stress, improving immune function, improving cardiovascular function, reducing inflammation, and optimizing telomerase, all that actually helps you not only be more resilient, it slows the aging process amazingly. So that, along with integrating your brain, and basically if we told you, Lisa and I told you, there's a vitamin that's going to give you these 6 changes. One big change in your brain is your brain becomes more integrated, and an integrated brain has been what's been shown is the basis, the highest correlate with well-being. So that's cool. And these 5 ways you change the molecules of health in your body using your mind. Then you go, whoa, give me that vitamin. But no, we said it's using your mind. You go, oh my God, how do I do it? So this is where the Wheel of Awareness practice has all 3 pillars that are the pillars in other studies, not of the wheel, but of other studies that are shown to create these 6 changes. So if you say, well, I want to use the pandemic to motivate me to build resilience and health, this is it. I mean, the research, absolutely clear. The steps, very practical. If you say, well, how do I learn to do it? Just go to my website or do the book Aware or whatever. I mean, that just takes you step by step by step. So it's not a mystery. It may be magical and magnificent to use your mind to create health in your body, but it's not magical. It basically is because where attention goes, neural firing flows and neural connection grows. So where attention goes is your mind. That's up to your intention to drive your attention, which is driving energy and information flow through your whole body and in your relationships with other people and the planet. That's the secret of the sauce, or the secret sauce, or however you're supposed to say that. Is it the secret of the secret sauce, or I don't know what it is, but anyway, that's the key.
Ingredient.
You can use your attention to change the structure and function of the brain, to change the structure and function of the molecules of health of your body. And we're not kidding. This is something you can do, and you could do it starting today.
Yep. In the middle of a pandemic.
In the middle of a pandemic.
I think that's the part that's so, like you said, people would take a pill, but it's a little bit of a different thing to just take this action, which is all within you, so the side effects are, there's no negative side effects like pills have.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is true there are no negative side effects, but let's just say something because it's often not said, and it's worth saying this, that one side effect is it takes your time and energy, and so that's hard, but that's not really a side effect, that's just a resistance factor. But it is true, it's worth just saying, it is true for some people, like with histories of trauma or even without histories of trauma, going inward can be distressing. Well, if it's distressing, take it a little more slowly, get some support from teachers or therapists or whatever, but don't let that stop you, because if you have, like, let's say, if I focus on the breath and I get a panic attack from the breath, that's a side effect of doing like a breath awareness practice. So maybe 95% of people don't have that, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that's your experience. Well, then try to figure it out. So for example, someone I once worked with had a near drowning accident that we didn't know about. And when we did the practice of being aware of your breath, he got a panic attack. And then we figured out because he hadn't worked through the trauma of almost drowning and dying, where he couldn't breathe. So focusing attention on the breath and bringing the sensation of the breath into awareness directly triggered a memory of his trauma. Now, that's not the only thing that can trigger panic, but for some people, I don't know if you call that a side effect, it's almost like an effect. You know, if you have something that when you do any of these things, focused attention, open awareness, or kind intention training, if any of that brings up something chaotic or rigid for you, that's our view of when you're not integrated, okay, just use that as an invitation to say, wow, I focused on the breath as an example. I got a panic attack. I'm walking around never focusing on my breath because I'll get a panic attack. Wow, I better do some work in that area. So yeah, I would say let's not call that a side effect. That's a direct effect. And then let's use that as an invitation. Okay, you have some work to do because ideally you should be able to sit in that hub and basically have awareness and say to anything on the rim, bring it on. I have such clarity of my mind that I can invite anything, including the breath, into awareness. And if there's something I can't, then let me do the work to open myself up so I'm free, right? So that's, I think, just worth saying, you know, because, you know, it's a powerful practice, these 3 pillar practices. And there are some people who have some experiences that are uncomfortable. And rather than see that as a problem, see that as an invitation. Do work to figure out what's going
on. I know one cardiologist here in Santa Barbara who says the side effect for him of meditation, the only negative side effect is he feels less inspired to go at meetings at the hospital.
to go to the meetings at the what?
You know, at the hospital and argue as much and feel like he has his point of view because they can tolerate people having more different points of view.
Yeah,
so, you know, he's maybe a little less of a but yeah, and so he's always recommending it to all his patients.
That's so good. Well, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's a very good thing. Well, this is great, Lisa. Great to chat with you about this stuff.
Really good to talk to you about it too. Dan, I wanted to circle back just for 1 second about one thing you said toward the beginning, which was about how people's temperament and how their attachment adaptations might be affected by the pandemic or affect, you know, like you're saying, some people are more introverted, so maybe this is a really calming time for them, being more in a controlled, isolated setting. But where for somebody who's more extroverted, it might be more challenging, I guess. But also for somebody who has different, you mentioned attachment, and I was wondering if you had a thought about how people with different attachment adaptations or, you know, would deal with it differently.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you and I did a couple of conversations, one of them in particular about attachment, but other ones too that I think would be very relevant to that. So we can talk about it briefly here, but just know that Lisa and I did a really extensive discussion of this one question that might be really, you know, very pertinent if something gets activated when we say this. But, you know, the 2 huge domains of our lives that influence how we become what we become. One is temperament, which is the kind of innate or non-experientially created factors or proclivities of our nervous system. And, you know, some of them may be genetic, some may be just random, you know, all sorts of things, but not experientially created. So they're not learned. The next is learned experiences, which for a child are dominant in the field of attachment, which is your relationship experiences with caregivers. So to put it really simply, attachment plus temperament combine to form your personality, which is your ways of, you know, being in the world, your emotional responses, your sensitivity, all this kind of thing. So, a pandemic is going to affect you depending on your personality, which will be created by both your attachment in a large way, including your peer interactions as well, your relationship experiences especially, and your temperament. So this is why it's just important to kind of distinguish those two. And I'm in the middle of finishing up a book with several co-authors on this very topic, of how does attachment and temperament combine to form who we are as adolescents and then adults, and then what can you do about it to become more, resilient in the face of stressors. So I don't want to get lost in all the details because we're in the middle of the manuscript, but I'll just say this, that, when you look at the structure of the brain and realize that many of the deep structures in the cortex and the limbic area beneath the cortex, these are pushing up on how you're going to respond to the experiences that are shaping the cortex's way of constructing things in a way. So you have kind of these innate things from below, these learned things from above, and then how they mix together, is going to determine, for example, here's the pandemic, and let's put aside the idea that you might have lost your job or people's lives are threatened, all that stuff. But the particularities matter. But now you're isolated at home. Your retirement funds are gone. Your all the profound ways our lives are impacted now, with a constant feeling of threat. If you had a temperament that was oriented towards sadness and separation, you're going to have one kind of distress. If another was about anticipating with anxiety the bad things that could happen, that's another way of responding. And another domain of temperament is to be angry or rageful about things not being right. And then, there's this whole way in which, if you take that view, you can show how temperament manifests itself in different particularities. So if someone is someone who, needs other people in a big way, then being isolated is going to be really hard. Other people don't need other people in a big way. They like to be around other people, but they don't need that. So it can be very different for those two temperaments, as an example. Whereas the attachment world, if I'm still with insecure attachment, let's say of the avoidant kind, I might find what's called a dismissing adult attachment as my go-to place. So when I'm in isolation, that's fine. That's the way I survived my childhood. What's the big deal? Whereas if I have what's called a preoccupied attachment, I desperately need other people, but I become isolated because the virus is telling me I have to be separated, I might be freaking out. So this, in an apartment house, if you had one person with dismissing attachment, the other with preoccupied attachment, from their attachment, they could have two totally different reactions to sheltering in place. One is it's like a relief, as one of my friends once said on what he wants on his tombstone. This is what he wants to write on his tombstone: alone at last.
A little avoidant, huh?
Which is like the last thing I would write on my tombstone, but that's what he would write on his tombstone. Yeah,
Right.
so okay, fine. So for him, sheltering in place would probably be fine, on some level. But anyway, so that's why, attachment is a different, it's a learned set of experiences, different construct and different domain, if you will, than temperament, but they're both important. And I'll tell you, writing this book, it's not only challenging writing with 3 other people, and one of them is not even alive, so 4 other people, but it's really challenging to make sure you honor temperament and genetics and experience and attachment, and really seeing how they intertwine in each of us in a unique way. But then you're writing a book, so you can't talk about 7 billion ways that would happen, so you have to look for patterns that aren't oversimplifications, overgeneralizations, and make it useful. And so I'm telling you, this is a hard book to write, anyway, so that's the idea.
But big challenges, but I'm looking forward to it because I've heard you talk about these different things before, but sounds like it's going to be a very cool book.
Well, this is, I think, the challenge even of the pandemic is like, how do you make general statements that aren't oversimplifications, but that are useful insights so someone can use them. Like, for example, the 7 things you can do in the daily, mental mind, whatever, the daily mind platter, or whatever it is. Yeah, those are what research shows, but make it your own. So Lisa and I can tell you, here's what some of the research shows, but make it your own. And that's easier to do here where we're chatting about it than when you sound so definitive typing out a sentence in a book, So
Right.
how because you don't want to be wishy-washy as a writer, but you also want to be like inviting people to make it their own and realize these are just kind of, fingers pointing to the moon. They're not the moon. So, just soak in the reality of your perception of the moon, and you don't have to take someone else's description or photograph or whatever as the definitive anything. You make
Right.
these things your own. Yeah.
Right. Like engage in physical activity, but the amount or how you do that could be very different for different people, depending on their abilities and what they
Yeah.
have access to. The having fun, you have fun playing Scrabble. I'm spelling challenged, so that's not going to be it for me.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
It'll be
Yeah.
creative
Yeah.
Scrabble.
Well, we
Yeah.
just bought 4 other board games, so I can tell you what they are later on. It's like Caroline said, okay, well, because our daughter's going to come, maybe move in with us soon. So it's like, all right, so now we're going to have 6 of us. We need a 6-person game. And, anyway, what's so great about fun is that it's just like the Dalai Lama said, it's our responsibility to be joyful and laugh and have lots of love because the world is full of suffering. So we need to make sure that the suffering does not depress us and disable us and make it like we can't laugh, because laughter is really good. I'll show you what my cup says.
There you go. I love it.
Laugh. And so we got to be laughing and full of love. That's how we have to lead and live our lives. Lots of L's there. And
Yeah.
so we can do it, and together we can do it even more strong.
Thank you so much for that, Dan, and thanks for your time. And this was, I think, going to be really helpful for people. So really, thanks for joining me.
Oh, I hope so. It was a lot of fun to be with you, Lisa.
Fun for me too. Great. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.